Hey guys, tonight we're standing at the edge of a desert under a sky full of stars so sharp and clear. It feels like someone scraped the smog off the Milky Way just for you. The sand beneath your feet still remembers the heat of the day, but the air's gone cool and still just barely brushing your skin. You're not in a movie set. You're not hallucinating from dehydration. You're in ancient Persia. And in front of you right now is a lump of ice. Yes, real ice. Cold, wet, glistening. In the middle of the desert. You stare at it. You blink. You reach out to touch it because this has to be a trick, or a dream, or maybe some early influencer's desert stunt gone historically viral. But no, this is real. And it's been real for over 2,000 years. Of course, if you were actually here, no sunscreen, no electrolyte packets, no knowledge of old Persian, you probably wouldn't survive more than a week. Not even long enough to get sunburned properly. But for now, just be glad you're floating ghost like through this story, with the benefit of modern comfort and hindsight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dome looms ahead, a massive mud brick bulb faintly glowing under moonlight. No doors, no windows, just curves. It looks like someone flipped an ice cream cone upside down and then buried the tip beneath the earth. You circle it slowly, brushing your hand along its warm outer wall. It's not cold, not yet, but something about it feels cool, like a secret waiting inside. There's a low opening, just tall enough to crouch through. You duck inside. And instantly the temperature drops. The air is still, dry, and heavy. You hear nothing, not even your breath, which now forms the faintest of clouds in front of your lips. You pause, you squint, and there it is tucked into the center of the pit, surrounded by the softest stone and silence as that same impossible thing, a chunk of ice. It's slightly melted around the edges. Maybe it's been here for days, maybe weeks. It doesn't matter. You reach out again, fingertips grazing the smooth frost, and a strange thought strikes you. This isn't just a pile of frozen water, it's history. Chilled, preserved, surviving. The Persians called these buildings yakshals, which literally translates to ice pit, though calling them that is kind of like calling the Great Pyramid a big triangle. They're far more clever than they look. From the outside, sure, they resemble a weird clay oven abandoned in the desert, but step inside, and you realize you've entered something closer to a science. Exhibit one built long before the word science even existed. Thick walls made from sarouge, a mixture of clay, ash, egg whites, lime, and goat hair. Don't ask how they discovered this. Someone probably had a very messy kitchen accident, but the result is waterproof, heat-resistant, and as durable as a stone fridge. This stuff was so good at keeping things cool and dry, it could resist moisture and earthquakes, which is more than you can say about most modern rental apartments. The dome itself? Not just for looks. That curve helps hot air rise and escape while keeping the cool air settled near the bottom. And if you look closely, yes, just there's a subtle shaft leading upward, a kind of chimney for hot air to drift out while the cold stays trapped like treasure at the bottom. Historians still argue whether yakshals were first used in the Achaemenid Empire around 500 BC. Or whether they came into wider use during the later Sassanid period. Some say they're even older, whispering about early prototypes, scattered along trade routes where water was precious and coolness was practically a religious experience. But let's step back outside again for a second. You squint up at the stars. No clouds, no rain, no chance of winter. So how, you might ask, did this ice get here in the first place? Ah, patience, grasshopper. That's a story for another section. For now, take a moment to appreciate the quiet ingenuity of what stands before you. Imagine the effort, the precision, the trial and error, the knowledge passed down from one architect's soot-stained scroll to another. People who looked at the desert and thought, let's make it colder. And not just to survive, but to thrive. Because here's the real twist. Ice wasn't just for emergencies. It wasn't just kept for medical needs or preservation. No, the Persians used it because they could. Because luxury mattered. Because drinking a glass of chilled rosewater on a 100-degree day was the kind of flex that made your enemies jealous and your guests adore you. There's a strange pride in that, in building something beautiful and functional and wildly impractical, just to prove you can. You know, like putting a pool on the roof of a skyscraper or launching a car into space. Except this isn't a billionaire's whim. This is survival turned into elegance. You sit now on a smooth stone ledge, halfway in shadow, half in cold. The air nips gently at your nose, and you wonder how many others have done the same. How many calloused hands stacked these bricks? How many tired travelers ducked into this very chamber to cool off, share a story, or steal a sip of icy pomegranate juice? You lie back, looking up into the curve of the dome, and it feels oddly like a womb safe, enclosed, perfectly balanced between two extremes, heat above, cold below, outside a desert, inside a marvel. You step back out into the warm night air, the sudden temperature difference clinging to your skin like a thin film of dream. Behind you, the Yakchal sits heavy and silent, its secrets tucked beneath layers of clay and engineering genius. But the story doesn't start or end with a dome. No, the real tale, the emotional heart of it all, is simpler. It's about people trying to stay cool. Because if there's one thing ancient Persians took seriously, it was cold. Not just for comfort, but for class. You wander into a quieter part of the settlement now, following the soft shuffle of sandals on packed earth. In one courtyard, an elderly man with a snow-white beard leans over a clay basin, sipping something pale and fragrant. He raises his cup to you, and even across the square, you can see the condensation sliding down its side. Chilled rosewater, most likely. A desert delicacy. You nod, and he nods back, like two members of a very exclusive club, lovers of all things cold. Here's the thing, coolness wasn't just a matter of survival in ancient Persia. It was prestige. If you had access to cold water, or better yet, ice, you weren't just lucky, you were powerful. Historians still argue whether this love of cold came more from practical needs or cultural symbolism. Some say it was about purity, cold water being cleaner, more refreshing, almost divine. Others think it was sheer luxury. Either way, you'd find signs of this obsession everywhere. In markets selling chilled syrups, in elaborate bathhouses with separate cool pools, in poetry that compares the beloved's breath to the freshness of morning ice. You duck into one such bathhouse now, where the tiled walls shimmer in the light of an oil lamp. The air inside is misty and fragrant. A young boy scampers past, holding a small clay bowl filled with something slushy. You peer in pomegranate granita, basically, served in 500 BCE. It's not uncommon, you learn, for nobles to throw summer feasts entirely themed around coolness. Picture shaded courtyards draped in linen, musicians playing soft melodies on lutes, servants carrying trays of iced fruit syrups, and in the center of it all, A tall clay jar, sweating in the sun, filled with near-frozen drink. Guests wouldn't just sip it, they'd talk about it for days. Who made the ice? Where did it come from? How long did it last? But cold wasn't just a treat, it was built into the fabric of Persian urban design. Streets were narrow and shaded, courtyards sunken and vine-covered, and homes often constructed with thick walls and underground rooms called shabistans. You descend into one, now careful of the uneven steps, and feel the immediate drop in temperature. It's maybe 15 degrees cooler down here. No yakchal in sight, just good design. These basement chambers weren't just storage spaces. Families slept here in summer. You can almost hear the muffled conversations, the clinking of small glasses, the rustle of linen sheets against stone. In one corner, a clay jar rests in a bowl of water, evaporative cooling at work. The same principle your modern fridge mimics, only without a plug. There's even a fringe theory floating around among scholars that cold water may have had ritual significance, that in Zoroastrian ceremonies, the element of water called aban needed to be not just clean but cool, symbolizing order, clarity, and the suppression of chaos. It's speculative, of course. Historians still debate whether temperature mattered religiously or was simply a byproduct of practicality. But standing here now, wrapped in the hush of ancient stone and gentle chill, it feels possible. You step back into the street, where the sun is beginning to rise over the horizon. Even now, the people you pass are preparing for the coming heat, hanging damp cloth over doorways, drawing water from deep cisterns, setting clay pots into shadowy alcoves. It's a daily dance with the sun, a choreography of resistance. And the real dancers? The ice makers, the cold keepers, the ones who turned nature on its head and handed out little miracles in ceramic cups. You wander now into a stall selling perfumes. The shopkeeper, a woman with ink-dark eyes and hands stained by rose petals, offers you a vial of something sharp and floral. You sniff and it's cold, chilled in a stone niche, a scented breeze in a bottle. You raise an eyebrow and she smiles. It soothes the headache, she says. The ice makes it last longer. You believe her. You step outside again and lean against a sun-warmed wall, the morning finally beginning to assert itself. The day will get hot. You know this. The sand will scald, the air will grow heavy, and everything will slow. But the city doesn't panic. It's prepared. It's always been prepared. Because here, in this desert world, cold isn't just a break from the heat. It's a statement, a lifestyle, a quiet rebellion. And right now, you're starting to feel like a member of that rebellion yourself. You wander through winding alleys now, letting the day settle into its lazy rhythm. The city has shifted into its heat avoidance mode. Wooden shutters creak closed. Shade stretches across streets like sleepy cats. Even the birds have paused, huddled in clay alcoves, feathers fluffed against the rising sun. But in the distance, there it is again, that strange, gentle dome, the one that held the ice. Your feet pull you toward it almost without thinking. You approach from a new angle this time, noticing details you missed before, the delicate slope of the outer wall, the faint sparkle in the clay from ancient bits of lime and sand, the slightly raised platform it rests on, maybe to help with airflow, maybe just to stop the goats from nibbling it. This time, you don't enter right away. You walk its perimeter slowly, counting each step, like a ritual. You're not alone in your reverence. People back then must have done the same. Some structures are beautiful by accident, but this was built to be admired. This was a yakchal. Yakchal. Say it again in your mind. It sounds like something from science fiction. A distant moon, maybe, or a Marvel villain with climate-based powers. But no, this is ancient Persian engineering, a refrigerator made entirely of mud, air, and logic. You crouch near the foundation, fingers tracing the join between two bricks. They're held together by sarouge, that signature mortar made of clay, ash, lime, egg whites, and goat hair. Yes, goat hair. Think of it like the medieval version of fiberglass insulation, except organic, and sometimes kind of itchy. Historians still argue whether sarouge was invented for the yakshal or borrowed from earlier uses in irrigation channels and bathhouses. What's clear is that it worked. This mix resisted heat, sealed against moisture, and stood firm for centuries. You're not sure whether to admire the chemistry or be mildly disturbed by how many eggs they must have cracked to build a single dome. Now you enter. Again, the cool rush of air. Again, the hush. But now you understand more. The inside isn't just a chamber, it's a conversation between air, earth, and time. At the bottom is the ice pit, often several meters deep, sometimes with drainage channels to carry away meltwater, which could be refrozen the next night. Above you, the dome arches with quiet mathematical grace, designed to trap cool air and let warm air rise and drift harmlessly through hidden vents. No moving parts, no switches, just smart design. And the walls, those thick tapering walls, aren't just insulation. They are the fridge, several meters thick at the base. Tapering toward the top, they act like a desert fortress against heat. You touch the inside curve, and the clay is cool, not icy, but calm, like it's been waiting for you. Quirky fact? Some archaeologists found small ledges and steps inside these domes. Maybe for maintenance. Maybe for storing different kinds of goods. Or maybe someone just wanted a quiet place to escape their noisy family. Honestly, you'd do the same. The largest yakchals could store tons of ice. Literal tons. Harvested in the winter, stored through the summer. And all this without electricity, freon, or a single humming motor. It's enough to make your modern freezer feel a little needy. You sit near the pit now, where the ice would rest, and imagine the daily rhythm of keeping this place running. The collection of ice, the layering of straw or ash between blocks, the inspections, the careful closing of doors, the whispered warnings. Don't open it too often. Don't let the kids near it. Don't waste it. Historians still debate how many yakchals existed in Persia at the height of their use. Some say dozens. Others suggest hundreds, scattered like cooling nodes across cities, villages, and caravanserai. What they do agree on is that no other ancient culture built quite like this, not at this scale, not this cleverly. And then there's the matter of where they were placed. Always in areas with maximum shade, often with a qanat, an underground water channel nearby, to help with water access and drainage. Sometimes built into hillsides, sometimes surrounded by wind catchers, always purposeful, always tuned to the rhythm of desert life. You lean back and close your eyes. No hum of a compressor, no whir of fans, just a cold silence, ancient and intentional. And you wonder, how did they know? How did they figure all this out without blueprints, without thermometers, without 3D modeling software? Maybe the answer is simple. Maybe it's this. They paid attention. They watched wind. They watched shade. They tested clay. They failed a lot, probably. Then they built something that worked and kept working. And in doing so, they built not just a storage space, but a kind of monument to patience. A place where cold could live in the desert. You step outside again, blinking into the growing light. The desert sun is starting to stake its claim on the day, and you can feel the heat already gathering in the air, lazy at first, but confident. The yak chow behind you hums with a kind of quiet smugness, like a wise old monk that's figured out how to stay chill no matter what the weather throws its way. But now you're curious not just about how they stored the ice, but how they made it. Because surely the desert didn't just hand them blocks of frozen water out of kindness. So you follow a dusty footpath toward the edge of the settlement, where the land flattens and the wind starts to pick up. You hear it before you see it, a faint rustling, like a soft breath through reeds. Then it appears, a row of shallow stone basins, dug into the earth and arranged like a checkerboard. At first you think they're ceremonial, or maybe for washing something. But when you crouch beside one and touch its cool, smooth surface, it clicks. These were the ice pans, a key part of the ancient Persian freezer aisle. Each night during the coldest months of the year, water would be poured into these basins and left to freeze under the stars. No snow machines, no refrigerated coils, just physics. Clear skies, dry air, and open space create perfect conditions for radiative cooling, where heat escapes into the night sky, and the water gives up its warmth to the cosmos. You sit on the edge of one basin and imagine the process. A team of workers pouring water by moonlight, carefully filling each shallow tray. The desert, so hot by day, becomes an accomplice at night. Temperatures dip below freezing, not always, but often enough. The thin layer of water cools fast. Ice forms silently in the dark. By dawn, the workers return. The frozen sheets are gently cracked, lifted, stacked, and carried, often using straw as insulation, straight to the yak shawl. Layer upon layer, stored, protected, cherished. Historians still argue whether the freezing was consistent enough to supply all the yak chows, or whether some regions relied more on transporting snow from distant mountains. Likely it was a mix of both. And yes, snow runners did exist. We'll get to that. But what's fascinating here is just how efficient this low-tech method was. And here's a fringe detail for you. Some scholars believe the basins were sometimes coated with a thin film of oil, just to reduce evaporation and accelerate cooling. Others say the oil was symbolic, or used only in rituals. No one can agree. But it adds a touch of alchemy to an otherwise practical process oil. Water, stars, and silence. You rise from the basin and walk a little farther, where the basins give way to long, low walls. These too are part of the trick. The walls are angled to block sunlight during the day, but allow maximum exposure to the open sky at night. Some were even built to cast shadows across the basins, so they'd stay frozen longer into the morning. You press your hand to one of the walls. Warm already, but not hot. The stones here know how to wait, how to outlast. Further out, beyond the basins and walls, the land tilts gently upward. You climb it, breathing slower now, legs soft from so much stillness. At the crest, you see the whole system laid out beneath you. The dome of the yak shawl in the distance, the basins like sleeping tiles, the faint glint of water in one that hasn't fully frozen. And you realize this wasn't a single invention. It was a network, a process, a lifestyle. Cold wasn't found, it was made. Quirky little detail? Some of the larger freezing complexes had watchers, usually elderly men or teenage boys, whose only job was to guard the ice as it formed. Not from thieves necessarily, but from animals. Birds could land, dogs might drink, and worst of all, curious children. You picture one of those watchers now, cloaked in rough wool, squatting by the basins in the coldest part of the night, watching frost gather with the same reverence a monk might watch prayer candles. Maybe they sang. Maybe they just listened. Either way, they were part of the ritual, the nightly miracle. And you? You'd probably fall asleep halfway through your first shift. But in this dream, let's say you last the night. You watch the stars spin slowly above. You hear the wind hush across the plains. And when the first hints of morning light begin to rise, you see the ice thin, pure, ghostly waiting. You help the others gather it. The pieces crack gently in your hands. Cold rushes through your fingers. A welcome bite. You carry it carefully, reverently, back toward the dome, back toward the yakchal, where this strange frozen treasure will rest, hidden from the sun, guarded by bricks and silence. And for a moment, just a moment, you understand how cold became sacred. By the time you make it back to the village, the sun is fully awake and mean about it. Shadows shrink like scared animals. The air thickens, and your clothes stick to your skin. But the yakchal? It just sits there, unbothered, immovable, cool on the inside, even as the world outside starts to boil. Still, not every Persian had access to one. Yakshals were impressive, sure, but like most impressive things in history, they were mostly owned, operated and enjoyed by the rich. Nobles, royals, and wealthy merchants all wanted their drinks cool, their dates crisp, and their guests thoroughly wowed. But what about everyone else? You follow the dusty road toward a smaller dwelling on the outskirts, a place without domes or servants, where goats outnumber humans and the nearest ice block is probably a 3-day walk away. This is where everyday Persians lived. Farmers, weavers, potters, people who didn't own a cold vault but still dreamed of that sweet stinging chill on the tongue. And that's where things get interesting, because even without ice pits or mountain runners, the average Persian still found ways to flirt with cold. You duck into a humble courtyard. A woman squats over a basin, scooping something from a wide clay pot. She offers you a cup. It's cloudy and pale, and it smells like cucumbers and mint. You sip, cold, shockingly cold. Not frozen, but refreshing in a way that seems unfair to the surrounding climate. You glance at the clay pot. It's slightly damp on the outside, resting in a shaded alcove, with a wet cloth draped over it. And suddenly you realize what this is, an evaporative cooler. A humble version of what science will one day call the Zir pot. 2 clay vessels, one inside the other, with the space between filled with wet sand. As the water evaporates from the outer surface, it cools the contents inside. No electricity, no moving parts, just cleverness. You grin and take another sip. Historians still argue whether these clay coolers were common household items or more of a niche technique used in certain regions. Some say they go back to Babylonian times. Others argue Persia refined the method, adding insulation techniques and lining the pots with special glaze. Either way, it worked. Poor people had access to cool water. Not ice, perhaps, but chill enough to soothe the throat and trick the mind. You follow the scent of something sweet down another alley. A group of children are huddled around a low stone counter, watching an old man with a long-handled spoon stir a massive bowl. He scoops the slush into cups and hands them out like a magician performing a spell. You peek in and spot the mix. Snow from somewhere may be borrowed, may be bought flavored with grape syrup and rose water, the Persian version of a snow cone. You accept a cup, and the first bite is a full-body experience. Sweet, floral, icy, and slightly gritty in a way that makes you strangely nostalgic for things you've never actually tasted. The kids grin at you, teeth already stained purple, and one of them holds up a slightly melted ball of ice like it's a jewel. Because it is. Ice is a marvel, a gift, a rare luxury, especially in this world where heat is relentless and time feels like a slow bake. But even for the rich, it wasn't always easy. You pass by a merchant villa, one of those sprawling estates with shaded gardens and shallow pools. You sneak a peek through the gate and spot a servant carrying a block of ice wrapped in straw and burlap, leaving a wet trail behind him. That block probably traveled for miles. Maybe it was frozen in a mountain basin, packed in sawdust, strapped to a donkey, and marched across blistering roads for days just to cool someone's melon slices. Quirky side note? There are old Persian texts that mention cold fevers believed to be caused by overindulging in chilled drinks. Some people swore that too much ice would shock the body and reverse the fire of digestion. Sound familiar? Ancient Persian parents basically invented the first ever warning about, "You'll catch a cold drinking that." And they weren't entirely wrong. The sudden contrast between internal heat and external cold probably did jolt the system. But let's be honest, you'd still take the risk, especially during summer. At royal banquets, ice wasn't just served, it was displayed. Tall jars sweating with cold, frozen fruit sculptures, sherbets carved into delicate spirals. The elite would brag about the size of their yak chow, the clarity of their ice, the softness of their sorbets. Serving something chilled in July was like pulling up to a party in a flying carpet. Overkill? Maybe, but undeniably cool. One scholar even claimed that Persian nobles measured status by how long their stored ice lasted into summer. If yours made it to August, you were the envy of the court. So while commoners had clever pots and shaded water, the rich had a full-scale operation behind every frosty treat. Ice makers, carriers, builders, and at the center of it all, the yakshal humming quietly in its mud brick glory. But whether you were sipping clay, cooled water in a dusty alley, or licking ice shavings from a silver dish in a palace garden, the desire was the same: to pause the heat, to feel something fresh, to know that even in a sun-bleached world, cold was possible. You're not sure exactly when it happens, but as you wander deeper into the city, the wind begins to change. It's subtle at first, more of a breath than a breeze, but then you feel it, a gentle tug at your robes, a hush down the alley, and then you look up and see it, a towering chimney-like structure, rising from the roof of a sun baked home like a clay periscope. It looks almost decorative, like a lighthouse for sand. But as you draw closer, you notice something curious. Cool air, faint but unmistakable, drifting from the base of the building. You've just met your first badger, also known as a wind catcher. These things are ancient Persia's version of air conditioning, except quieter, cheaper, and probably more stylish. You walk around the structure slowly, noticing how its tall vertical flues are divided by thin walls, like a pie chart built by someone with an engineering degree and a grudge against summer. And inside, airflow magic. The concept is deceptively simple. The tall tower catches wind high above, funnels it downward into the building, and forces hot air out through another opening. Or if there's no wind, it creates negative pressure to suck warm air up and out. Either way, the result is the same: cooler air inside, despite the desert trying its best to melt everything in sight. You step into the connected house, and the change is immediate. Not cold exactly, but cooler, calmer, like stepping into a room that remembers winter. The badger works best in tandem with water. Below you, somewhere in the lower level, there's likely a shallow pool or a kianat channel, subterranean water carved through the bedrock and channeled into the home like an underground river. As the air passes over the water, it picks up moisture and loses heat. What you get is a kind of natural swamp cooler, except this one's been around for over 2,500 years and still doesn't need a tech support hotline. Historians still argue whether the badger originated in Persia or if the idea trickled over from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. But Persia no doubt perfected the form. From the tall towers of Yaz to smaller versions found in caravanserai, wind catchers became as iconic as domes and arches. You climb a narrow staircase, now uneven, dusty, winding to reach the base of the wind catcher itself. Here you see the inner walls rising high above you, channels cut precisely to guide air from all four directions. If one side isn't catching a breeze, another will. It's like the building is hedging its bets against the wind. A quirky discovery? Some badgers had interior dampers made of cloth or wood, allowing residents to close off certain channels to control airflow, depending on the season. Adjustable medieval HVAC, basically. Persian comfort was never just about aesthetics. It was about control. You descend again, stepping back into the main living space where soft cushions line the walls and a jug of cool water waits on a stone ledge. You sit and breathe and marvel. Because this is what ancient homes did best, they collaborated with the environment. Instead of fighting the heat with brute force, they redirected it, softened it, shaped it into something tolerable, sometimes even pleasant. You think of modern cities, glass towers baking under sun, air conditioners growling through metal vents, and it feels almost backward now. Maybe we stopped paying attention. Maybe we got too good at pushing buttons and forgot how to listen to wind. Here in this house beneath the wind catcher, the only buttons are clay ridges beneath your fingers. The only system is the sky, and it works. You sip the water from the jug, cooler than you expect, not icy but gentle. It tastes of stone and time. Outside, the wind rises again. It whistles faintly through the top of the tower, and for a moment the air inside the room swirls just enough to ruffle your sleeves. You sit back and imagine someone hundreds of years ago doing the same, watching the same cloth ripple, feeling the same drift of peace. Even royal palaces weren't above this technology. Wind catchers were often paired with yakchals in large estates, using their combined power to cool both air and food. Some grand homes had entire ventilation networks, where wind would pass over cold water from the yakshal, then sweep through shaded courtyards and down into the shabistan, the deep stone rooms where the family slept during the summer months. It wasn't just smart, it was elegant. One scholar called Persian homes machines of climate, not walls with roofs, but interactive systems. Breezes, stone, shadow, silence, all tuned like instruments in a slow desert symphony. You step outside once more. The tower behind you glows in the sunlight. There are more now dotting the skyline like watchful sentinels, each one a monument to wind, to patience, to an old world that never forgot how to breathe. And as you walk on, brushing sand from your sleeves, you realize the desert may burn by day. But the Persians? They learned how to answer the heat with grace. You follow the trail of cooled air and laughter down a wide shaded boulevard now. At this hour, the city starts to hum with slow movement traders unrolling fabrics, fruit sellers arranging figs like little velvet cushions, children darting between clay columns like sand-colored sparrows. But you're chasing something colder, something sweeter. And then you smell it. A whisper of rosewater, orange peel, maybe even mint. But more than that, you feel the chill, a subtle invitation against your sweat-slicked skin. You turn a corner, and there it is, a sherbet stand. A real one. Not the bright artificial stuff of modern ice cream shops. No plastic tubs or neon spoons. Just clay jars, stone bowls, big copper basins swirling with icy mixtures that glint in the sun like frozen gemstones. The merchant gives you a nod. He doesn't rush you, he knows the effect. Everyone slows down when they see it. The pale pink sherbet. the indigo grape ices, the faint sparkle of snow dusted with crushed pistachio. This isn't just dessert. This is a minor miracle. You ask for a small bowl, and he ladles it out with care. The spoon clinks softly against the stone. The sherbet is a blend of snow, syrup, and flower water, delicate and potent. The first taste is like time stopping in your mouth. Cold, sweet, floral, and fleeting. You eat slowly, savoring it like someone who understands this isn't ordinary food. This is bragging rights food. Because here's the truth, in ancient Persia, cold treats weren't just for refreshment. They were a statement. If you served someone something icy in the middle of summer, you weren't just feeding them, you were telling them, I have power, I have access, I control nature. Historians still debate the exact recipes. Some say the royal sherbet included stewed fruits, saffron, and even ambergris. Yes, that weird stuff from Wales. Others argue simpler was better, snow and syrup, stirred until smooth. What they do agree on is the presence of ritual. Ice wasn't just dropped in a cup, it was curated. In royal courts, entire feasts revolved around chilled things. Bowls of snow laced with honey and basil. Slivers of frozen melon arranged in star patterns. Icy yogurt drinks sipped between courses like edible sighs. Some accounts even describe frozen floral infusions molded into miniature sculptures, roses, pomegranates, crescent moons melting slowly on gold plates. You imagine it now, a shaded pavilion, velvet cushions, a half circle of nobles in silk robes, each cradling a silver bowl like a holy object. Somewhere nearby, music plays soft strings, a slow drumbeat. And at the center, the sherbet, icy, perfumed, and very, very political. Because yes, even dessert was diplomacy. Serving ice showed control over time and season. Sharing it meant generosity. Refusing it? A potential insult. Quirky side note, some Persian poets wrote odes to sherbet, literal love poems about the sensation of coldness on the tongue, or the flirtatious drip of melting ice during courtship. One line even compares a beloved's glance to a drop of rose sherbet, sweet, cool, and momentarily devastating. You finish your bowl and hand it back with quiet reverence. The merchant gives you a faint bow, as if to say, you get it, you do. You stroll on now, passing by more homes, some still with yakchals out back, others relying on snow shipments from the mountains. And yes, there were people for that. The ice runners, brave or possibly just underpaid workers who traveled up to the snow line of nearby mountains during the coldest months, carved huge blocks of ice, and then dragged them down on sledges, donkeys, or wagons, wrapped in layers of straw, felt, and desperation. The trip was long. The losses were great. But the payoff? Monumental, especially if they reached the city before too much of the block had melted. Historians still argue whether these ice runs were state-organized or a more decentralized hustle, perhaps both, depending on the region. But either way, these couriers of cold became folk heroes in some regions. There are old ballads, half lost now, about a man who hauled a half-ton block of ice from Mount Damavand to Shiraz without losing more than a single fistful. You pause near a fountain, hands dipping into the cool stream. The water isn't icy, but it's enough to pull you back into yourself, back into the body that's slowly acclimating to this strange world where heat is everywhere, but so is the resistance to it. That's what this culture seems to understand so well. It's not about beating the heat. It's about balancing it, knowing when to lean into shadow, when to sip, when to rest, and when to take a bite of something so cold, it stops your thoughts mid-sentence. You lean back on a low wall and gaze at the stand again. A new customer approaches. their face lighting up at the first spoonful, just like yours did. And you realize some joys are timeless, cold on the tongue, sweetness on the breath, the soft brief shock that reminds you you're alive and, for now, incredibly lucky. The sun is curling downward now, finally a little tired of its own intensity. The city breathes again. Doors creak open. Feet step outside. The smell of warm bread and cooling clay drifts through the streets like a lullaby. You follow it, lazily, contentedly, past domes and courtyards and trickling fountains, until you reach a low, sunken garden with a long channel of water cutting through the center. This is a paradise garden, or as the Persians called it, a paradisa, yes, the root of the modern word paradise, a square of symmetry and greenery, designed to mirror the divine, trees, vines, and flowers arranged in balance, with water flowing right through the middle like time itself. You kneel beside the water channel and dip your hand in. It's not icy, but it's cool. Not by accident, the water comes from a qanat, that underground aqueduct system you've been hearing whispers of all day. You trace the flow with your eyes, wondering where it begins. Probably miles away, up in the hills, where snowmelt and springs seep into the soil. There, some brilliant engineers centuries ago carved a tunnel slowly, precisely, with hand tools and math, and tilted it just enough to let gravity do its thing. No pumps, no motors, just slope and stubbornness. The qanat carries water underground, protected from evaporation, insulated from heat, until it emerges here clear, cold, and quietly miraculous. You splash your face, and the effect is immediate. You're not just refreshed, you're revived. Historians still argue who built the first qanats. Some say Persians. Others say earlier cultures like the Elamites, or even the Babylonians. But it's Persia that made them widespread, efficient, and beautiful. Some qanats stretched for tens of kilometers, lined with stone, vented at regular intervals with vertical shafts that doubled as wells. You lean over one of those, now just a little round hole in the garden floor. You drop in a pebble and count. 1, 2, 3, plink. Still water, deep and dark, still waiting. These systems weren't just for gardens and households. Qanats fed farms, filled reservoirs, supplied workshops and palaces. In some towns, they even cooled entire ice houses, carrying water directly into the pits at night, then draining away excess meltwater in the day. You sip from a clay cup offered by a boy who's been watching you quietly. The water tastes of stone and sleep, of distance, of effort. You thank him with a nod, and he grins, then runs off barefoot through the garden, ducking between trees whose leaves flicker like silver coins in the wind. Fringe detail? In some Persian villages, the qanat keeper was considered as prestigious as the mayor. Their job wasn't just technical, it was sacred. They walked the tunnels barefoot, feeling for changes in moisture. They listened for echoes. They knew every curve and junction like a map of their own veins. And at night, when the world cooled, they'd lie in the garden above and listen to the whisper of water under stone. Not a job, a calling. You lie back in the shade now, surrounded by the soft rustle of leaves and the trickle of ancient irrigation. You realize something. This isn't just a system of cooling. It's a culture of coolness. Not just in temperature, but in pace, in precision, in priorities. Where your world builds tall to impress, this world builds downward to preserve. Where your world chases the artificial, this one whispers with the real, with wind, water, and silence. You glance at a small clay jug, half buried in soil, neck wrapped in cloth. It's an anchored cooler, placed near the roots of a tree to chill the water slowly and feed the plant without scorching it. Even gardening is done with cold in mind. And that's the genius of it all. The yakchal may be the symbol, the ice the spectacle, but it's this system, this web of decisions made coolly and deliberately, that defines ancient Persian survival. From the domed freezer to the sherbet stand, from the wind catcher to the underground waterway, everything whispers the same message. Slow down. Think deeper. Cool is earned. And as the garden darkens, the last golden flecks dancing across the water's surface, you start to feel it not just physically, but mentally. You feel cooler, calmer, collected, the way the Persians liked it. Evening slides in like silk now, and the city glows in a softer key. Lanterns are being lit small flames behind colored glass, swaying gently in the breeze. The market closes with a yawn, and the streets hum with a new kind of life. Children playing, old men trading stories in the corners, and you still wandering, still marveling at how a desert civilization mastered the art of cold. You're walking near a caravanserai now, that massive roadside inn where merchants, messengers, and camels converge. It's a brick and stone sprawl of courtyards, stables, kitchens, and sleeping quarters. But tonight, something catches your eye. At the back of the compound, tucked in a shaded corner, sits a miniature yakshal, smaller than the city domes, more modest, but unmistakable in shape and purpose. Even on the road, it seems, some people didn't want to go without their ice. You crouch beside it and run your hand along the wall, rough with age, yet solid. This one probably stores ice brought from mountain routes, or maybe from a larger town nearby. A kind of cold pit stop. Merchants might use it to chill water, preserve food, or offer sherbet to weary guests. You slip inside, ducking your head, and once again feel that now familiar drop in temperature. It's like entering a memory of winter. In the center lies a round, shallow pit, empty now, but you can imagine it packed with snow or layered with straw and cool dates. A quiet, portable version of everything you've come to admire. Historians still debate how widespread these traveling yakchals were. Some claim they were rare luxuries, built only along the busiest Silk Road arteries. Others insist they were common in major stops, especially in desert regions where heat made perishables. Well, perish. Either way, this one still stands, still cool, still proving its point. You emerge into the courtyard again, where a caravan is unloading crates of dried fruit, ceramic bowls, and wrapped bundles of herbs. One of the merchants waves you over and offers a small wooden box. Inside, saffron ice. Not a full dish, just a sliver. A yellowish shard with a heady scent and a flavor that punches above its weight. Sweet, floral, slightly spicy, and most importantly, cold. You let it melt on your tongue, slowly, deliberately, while the world bustles around you. And that's when you notice the architecture of the caravanserai. It's no accident. The walls are thick and high. The doorways are narrow. The inner courtyards are shaded by vines. And water channels run along the walkways qanat-fed, most likely carrying coolness where it's needed. Even the storage rooms are underground, built partly into the earth and lined with stone. Evaporative cooling here, just like in the village homes. Everywhere you look, the same principles echo. Trap the cold, shelter the shade, move water gently. Quirky side note, in some caravanserais, travelers were charged by how long their perishables could be stored in the mini yakshal. 2 days for grapes, 3 for fish. One record supposedly says, a medieval cold storage subscription service. Ice as currency, chilling as economy. You sit near the fountain now, where a camel is drinking like it's the end of time. The breeze has picked up again, You watch it ripple across the water, across the traveler's robes, across the lantern flames that lean slightly east. And you think about what it means to carry cold across a desert, to wrap it in straw, to drag it on a mule's back, to shelter it under domes, to pour it into clay jars and cool the tongues of strangers. It's not just cleverness, it's conviction, because the heat never stops. The sun never says, "You've had enough." And still, they built a culture where cold existed not constantly, but reliably. Not everywhere, but somewhere. Enough to taste it, enough to believe in it. And that's maybe the most human thing of all. Not just survival, not just adaptation, but insistence. We will have cold. We will eat it, sip it, share it. We will build domes to hold it. We will invent rituals around it, and we will pass those rituals on. The courtyard quiets now. The camels lie down. The last merchant closes his stall. And you sit there, warm on the outside, cool on the inside, heart wrapped in something ancient and improbable. Because somehow, in the hottest places, people found the most patient ways to make cold. The stars return slowly, like someone dimming the lights on a giant stage. One by one, they blink into existence, soft and steady above the quiet roofs of the city. You're standing now on a small hill outside the walls, looking back at it, all the domes, the towers, the flickering lanterns that seem to breathe in the dark. Behind you, the desert stretches into nothing. In front of you, everything glows with that sleepy orange hue of clay kissed by moonlight. And the yakchal? It's still there, silent and content, as if it never needed your attention to begin with. You settle down into the soft dust, cross-legged, the air finally cool against your cheeks. A gentle wind snakes past your shoulder, carrying with it the faintest scent of rosewater and stone. You close your eyes for a moment and try to take stock of what you've seen. You remember the ice pan's silent sheets of water freezing under a desert moon. You remember the yakchal's belly, dark and echoing, where cold felt like a secret. The wind catchers that listened to the sky, the sherbet that melted too fast, the little boy in the garden with dust on his heels, the connaught's whisper far beneath the world. All of it. This wasn't just a history of technology, it was a history of longing. For comfort, yes, but also for control, for grace under pressure, for a pause button in a place that never stops burning. Historians still argue whether Persian ice culture peaked during the Achaemenids, the Safavids, or somewhere in between. They bicker over domes per capita, over snow import routes, over the true composition of royal saffron ices. But they all agree on this: it worked. The system worked. In a place that should not have allowed for cold, people made cold happen anyway, repeatedly, reliably, poetically. Quirky fact to send you off: there are still functioning yakchals in Iran today. Not just ruins, not just museum pieces, structures that still keep things cold, using no electricity, built before the world had wires. Some towns still celebrate when the first ice of the year is harvested from the mountains and brought home. And for a moment you're part of the rhythm, part of the ritual. Because in Persia, cooling wasn't just an engineering problem, it was cultural choreography, a blend of math and magic, brick and breeze, ice and patience. Now here's the final sip. So next time you open your freezer or sip something iced on a hot day, remember this: you're not just refreshing yourself, you're participating in a tradition, one that began long ago in a place where cold wasn't easy, but it was worth everything. And now, with the dome behind you and the stars stretching their arms across the sky, it's time to let your breath slow down, let your body soften, like that final drop of sherbet melting quietly in its bowl. The desert around you is peaceful now, not empty, just still. The wind has cooled, the sand no longer scorches, and the sky is endless. You feel safe here, as if the world itself has exhaled and made space just for you. Maybe you're lying at the edge of a qanat garden. Maybe you're leaning against the wall of a yakhshal, the clay still warm from the day but cool beneath your back. Maybe you've got a cup of rosewater in your hand, still cold from the ancient earth below. There's no need to decide. Just breathe. Let the details fade a little. Let the roughness of history smooth into sand. Let the brilliant inventions and clever engineers rest quietly now. They've done their job. The cold has come, and you're drifting gently across centuries, wrapped in stories like layers of straw around a precious block of ice. You've seen enough for one night. So let the windcatcher's lullaby sing you into sleep. Let your mind float down into the pit, deep where time can't reach you. Let go.